Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Roger Desjardins, County Manager for Lee County. If you all were in the board meeting just now, we had a discussion about the Twin Stadium, Hammond Stadium, and some potential issues with what is generally referred to as the boardwalk. And as you can see on the screen, the boardwalk is depicted in the blue shading. That project was part of a renovation that was done a few years ago, and through our mostly routine structural reviews that we do annually, we have noticed over the last couple of years a change in the physical configuration of that boardwalk. So, you heard all of our comments, I think, during the board meeting, and so Dave Harner, who is Deputy County Manager, and will take lead administratively on this project as we continue this investigation, along with County Attorney Richard Wesch, and so we're here to answer your questions today.
So you said, this bridge was all just constructed in 2015, not very long ago. So how did it get so quick that there's such a structural issue going on now? Is there someone at fault? What is that issue and how did it happen so quick?
Well, none of us in this room are structural engineers, and it's impossible to answer that question, why did it happen so fast? We don't know the answer to that question yet. We also don't know where the fault lies yet. We're waiting for an engineering report, as we stated earlier, and that report will get a peer review from a second engineering firm that we've hired, so that when we get those final results, we'll be much better able to answer those questions.
Now, is Manhattan Construction the one that's kind of doing the repairs and hiring the outside engineers? Did they also build the boardwalk?
Manhattan was the contractor that built the boardwalk and the rest of that project.
So is that why you guys hired them back to do the repairs?
It's important to have all of those that are originally involved in the engineering, design, and construction to do the initial assessment. They have all of the documents and the as-built drawings and all the engineering plans. We have them as well, but they need to be involved in the initial review. However, once they do their review, we have our own engineers that we have hired to review that work as well.
Was it a predecessor company to Manhattan that built the stadium and JetBlue, or was it Manhattan itself?
Dave?
Manhattan Construction built JetBlue. It was a Manhattan joint venture. It was a Twins joint venture that built CenturyLink. So Manhattan was the lead. We had two other entities, which were Christel and Casey Construction.
What's the impact on spring training activities first of all, from Manhattan?
Spring training will happen. It'll be, the boardwalk is closed, as we mentioned in the board meeting, but the spring training will happen in the stadium as normal.
But there's an indication that there may not be seats available?
Only along the boardwalk. Any ticket sales that are on the boardwalk will not be available.
Would the company have any liability to Baltimore if certain tickets weren't able to be sold at reduced capacity?
Dave?
Couple factors, and if I could just go back and clarify, so far the county has not hired Manhattan Construction. We reached out to the partners that worked with us to develop the project back in 2013, and they have all stepped up to the plate, no pun intended, to assist us in this review process. So they're not under contract. We did sign an agreement with them back in September of this year whereby they obligated themselves to step up, and they are living up to that agreement. Right now, the partnership that built the stadium is the same partnership that's working to address the concerns that we have. With regard to ticket sales, I think that's a question that's premature at this time and would be probably better directed toward the Twins at some point in time, not for us to answer.
Do we know how many seats are along the boardwalk that will be impacted?
Yes, there's about 1,700.
1,700?
But it's standing room included, so yes.
Okay.
All that's ticket sales. I would explain it that way.
So that could be a big fiscal impact for ticket sales here for spring training.
That could have an impact on the Twins, correct.
Now, we're hiring the state, or not, you just said we're not hiring. We're agreeing to be with Manhattan Construction. same company that built this, same company that built that boardwalk, where we're possibly having these structural issues, is it safe to assume that they are credible to step up to the plate and fix what they did wrong?
Well, Manhattan is a company that does work all over the country. So yes, they're a very good company. They've worked with us before. They'll continue to work with us. This is a process to review the issue to see if there are any issues. We want to do this out of abundance of caution. We close the boardwalk until we have that report in our hands. But once we get the report in our hands, that's not the end of it. We have the peer review, and then we have all our partners going to review that documentation and walk through it and make sure that we understand what the issue is, how we're going to address it, the magnitude, and ultimately the solution.
Dave. Further to your question about, which is, I think the simple version is who's going to do the remediation project if that's required. Before we can even get there, people have to understand there are multiple pieces to professions that design and build these stadiums, and it starts with design and engineering, which are separate firms from companies like Manhattan, for example, that actually do the construction project. And so every step has to be reviewed by structural engineers and construction companies. So to talk about who's going to do the remediation, if it's required, I mean, it's just a little premature to try and have that conversation.
And then also, I know Cecil had brought it up in the board meeting. Is this taxpayer funded? Will it not be? What's kind of the funding behind this? Who's going to?
Okay. I think what our chairman wanted us to convey is that both these spring training facilities were bonded, and the debt service is paid with bed tax dollars. So there are not property tax dollars that we use to pay the debt on these stadiums. Where the funds are going to come from exactly for remediation, if that's required, we've yet to identify the source.
On JetBlue, that park will be open for spring training with no issues from what you're seeing right now?
That's correct.
There had seemed to have been two issues, if I recall correctly, one involving trusses and one with respect to concrete. Has there been any studies done as to whether or not that was a quality pour of the concrete there? Are there any issues with the concrete supply for that project?
There were no issues with the concrete. It was installation of plates that brought the deck into the rest of the boardwalk. So that was been corrected.
So it was all mechanical?
Yes.
And I feel like we maybe talked about it, but I'm kind of lost. What is the exact? I know we're still doing the surveys, but what exactly is the issue with the boardwalk? Is there a slope? Is there a crack? Is there, what is that?
So if you were to go out there and take a look at some of the decking in this specific area, and this area in particular, what you would notice if you got it down at eye level with that concrete decking, you'd see it, it's called deflection. It deflects, a little up, a little down. It's a little bit of a roller coaster. Right? If you dropped a marble on the concrete, it wouldn't stay in one place. It would roll in one direction or another.
Both of these places have problems with left field. Have anything to do with sun or the way they're positioned or anything like that?
Billy, it's premature to try and assign reasons for the issues that we're investigating.
Now, does that concern you at any? What's the level of concern you guys have? Because you have two stadiums that had kind of issues. We have JetBlue, now we have Hammond, under the same person who built both. What's the level of concern that you have knowing that this is happening at both? This happened at both.
Well, to be clear, this did not happen at both stadiums.
Well, we had some.
No, let me answer. To be clear, this did not happen at both stadiums. As it is with any construction of this type, that's fairly complex. And let's go to the Red Sox stadium. Those were simple issues where concrete pads came together, and there needed to be some additional work done to keep the water from intruding. So that's not a structural issue. That's almost a routine maintenance issue. You can't build these kinds of facilities and not have to do capital maintenance on them like that over time. And it actually doesn't, and in some cases, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 years down the road or 5 years down the road, it is simply going to happen. So over at the Red Sox Stadium, we don't have any structural issues that we're worried about. In this facility, we do annual structural reviews, and we started a couple years ago watching some of that deflection in the concrete. And so because of the visual inspections and what appeared to be a progression, that's what really caused us to want to take a much harder look. And are we concerned about it? Of course we are. We are mostly concerned for public safety. That's why we're closing the deck in an abundance of caution. We don't know for certain yet that there's a danger there. We just don't know. It's premature, but it's an abundance of caution, and we'll be sure to let you know as soon as we know exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Y'all good? All right. Thank you all.